With your Working Virginia update, I'm Doug Cunningham. As it looks for new ways to grow and to overcome the hurdles for workers who want to be in unions, AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says that the key is effectively pursuing an agenda of shared prosperity for all American workers.
In order for workers to succeed, in order for workers to have a voice, they have to have a voice at the workplace, they have to have a voice in the economy, they have to have a voice in American politics. We're trying to do all three of those things. We're trying to create an environment where those workers that really want to have a union can have a union. We're trying to create an environment where we join together with our progressive friends to create an economy that doesn't just work for the top 1%, but works for all workers. We call it shared prosperity.
Working Virginia Update, produced by Workers Independent News. I'm Doug Cunningham.
This update made possible by the Office and Professional Employees International Union, ensuring fair treatment, fair wages, and benefits for thousands of working Virginians. Online at opeiu.org.
Yo, George Dr. Funkenstein Clinton saying you're listening to We Act Radio. They do the dog, y'all.
What's up, everybody? This is Frank Knuckles from the legendary Roots Crew, and you're listening to right now We Act Radio. Stay tuned, stay locked.
Where else will you get the most current information on game changers?
Design thinkers and well-known innovators.
In-depth interviews from visionaries, trendsetters, from science to food to entertainment.
On the Behind the Mind radio show.
We Act Radio, 1480 AM, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. every Friday. Join me, your host, Karen Baker.
And me, Anthony Leonard.
We'll talk about design, innovation, and culture.
Think different about design. Behind the Mind radio show.
All right.
We Act Radio, Behind the Mind. We want to hear from people that find the time to think and create these fine designs and then turn them into real product lines. So call us up, Behind the Mind. We want to hear from people that find the time to think and create these fine designs and then turn them into real product lines. So call us up now.
Welcome, everyone.
Welcome everyone.
Welcome to Behind the Mind radio show on React Radio, 1480 AM, powered by
Ethical Electric.
I tell you, I always, live radio.
It's a trip, to say the least.
It is. You have to really be on your toes, I tell you.
And prepared.
Wow. But, I know a lot of people are excited because today we're going to have co-author Tim Clark of Business Model Generation and now Business Model U. We love this book.
Yeah. The original book, this book, both of them, we love it.
Yeah, we had to use this book. It was first introduced to both of us through SCAD at the design management degree. But a lot of people know about this book. And when I even gave it to other people who are trainers or people in communications and marketing, it was like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for forever.
Because it helps you craft your craft in a way.
It does.
If you think about it like that.
It does.
It's amazing. Just going back to the business model generation, it goes into how to generate a solid business model. From that, we go into Business Model U, and it makes it, like I said on Facebook yesterday, it internalizes the business model and makes yourself a commodity.
Yeah, and really, initially using the book for the business model canvas, and even doing something like a journey map. Right. You look at it and you would say, okay, could I actually use this for myself? And then here we go. Here's a book. Yep.
And as soon as I found out about it, I was like, oh my God, we have to have Tim Clark on the show. And he said, yes, thank you, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's holding online. We're going to be bringing him on in just a little bit as well. But, the tools in the book, if you are in transition, they're excellent. I think also if you just want to elevate your game, it's another key thing that you can use as well too. I'm a big fan of this whole Holland 6 tendencies. It just narrowed down really quickly who I am. So the tools in this book are just incredible. It's It sold almost 1 million copies in combination. It's in 26 different languages, which is impressive. Impressive. And Tim is just all over the world. I think he hit me Monday and he was in Budapest. I mean, he's just all over the world.
Now he's back home, and then I think he's going somewhere else soon.
Yeah. So he's nice and cozy and going to be able to, you're going to feel like you got a lesson in the business model when you listen to this hour of Behind the Mind radio show. So we're going to jump in real quick to the idea of the week before we go to break and get to Tim. But, there's some interesting things on Kickstarter. And one of them is this thing called Barren Fig, which is they want to basically take a sketchbook and a notebook for thinkers and simplify it.
Okay.
And it's interesting because they are 6 days away from meeting their goal. They had a goal of 135,000 in order to do this, and they're at 126.7 is what they're at as well. But when you read through it, I mean, I'd be interested for them to give me a little more insight, because when you read through it, I'm trying to really be clear on what makes it so different from a sketchbook that you pick up. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. I'm showing Anthony this at the same time, too. I even did the play. But, when you look at it, they're just writing.
Okay. So it opens flat. Well, that's one thing that I see.
Right.
Oh, whoa. Okay. So we're live. Hey. So it opens flatter than your normal sketchbook.
Okay, got it. I always need backup over here. Let's see. Smart. So it does.
And dot grid.
Okay.
Smart dimensions. Okay. I mean, I see how, but I don't see the benefit of it.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. But a lot of people put their money behind it. So, I need to be clear on the benefit of it. So if you are with Barren Fig, send us a Twitter message and tell us the uniqueness of this, because I would love to have you on. And I really want to promote it. Yeah. Because, when you talk about thinkers, creative people, we're always sketching. I started using whiteboards on my tablet, per a friend referring us to that, and I'm just trying to figure out, how could we use this better?
And so they are have expensive, too.
$20.
$20 for one.
Right.
So, I mean, it comes in blank, dot, or gridded or ruled.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I see the point of that for me being an artist.
Right.
You have points of reference you can use that for. But,
so maybe it makes it so that it gives you more of a technical angle to a sketchbook.
Yeah. I see how it kind of marries architecture with design.
Okay. All right. Okay, Anthony.
That's what I'm seeing here. I'm just like, I see the guy. If you go on Kickstarter, take a look at it.
Yeah.
Barren Fig.
BARON. And an FIG. So take a look at it, because they're 6 days from their goal, and I think they'll meet their goal.
They're real close. They're real close. So they're obviously doing something right.
Which is great. So we're going to go to break, and when we come back, we'll go into this in-depth conversation with Tim Clark. We're not even going to break after we get back. We're going to give Tim
all the way through after
40 minutes of just straight business model generation. We'll be back.
We're excited.
World, it's Raheem Devon, the Love King. The album, a place called Loveland, is coming extremely soon. Listen out for that. And you're tuned into Behind the Mind Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
June 27th is National HIV Testing Day.
HIV testing is fast, painless, and often free. I've been tested for HIV.
I've been tested for HIV. Have you? To find an HIV testing center near you, visit greaterthan.org.
Do you have a case of the saggy nagging?
Stop taxation without representation. Help win D.C. statehood. The D.C. Statehood Survey Campaign starts June 26 on the National Mall, so please volunteer now by calling 202-232-2500 or send an email to standup_freedc@yahoo.com or go to freedc.org. Stop taxation without representation. Help win D.C. statehood.
for real progress. DC, we demand a vote for DC, we demand a vote, so tell Congress.
So, this is Jason Orr from Funk Jazz Cafe Arts and Music Festival and Soul of Earth, the group. You're listening to Behind the Mind. And if you want to know more about us, check us out at funkjazzcafe.com, FUNKJAZZKAFE, not a C.com.
Does your child have difficulty controlling their anger or a history of academic failure in school? Options Public Charter School offers a therapeutic learning environment with small classroom sizes and on-site counseling services to help students succeed. Options PCS is now enrolling grades 5 through 11 for the upcoming school year. For more information, call Options PCS today at 202-547-1028. Options Public Charter School. Exceptional education for exceptional students.
It's party time. What's good? This is Tracy Lee, ESQ that is, and you're listening to Behind the Minds radio show on We Act Radio.
Hi, I'm Patrick Ewing. I'm here giving something back to the community. I went to school here. I lived here in the community. I have an office here on Minnesota Avenue. I always loved D.C., and just trying to give something back to the community of Ward 8 in this community or from around the country. We Act Radio, do something.
We Act Radio, powered by Ethical Electric. Do something.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Behind the Mind Radio Show. I'm Karen Baker.
And I'm Anthony Leonard.
And I think we have Tim Clark on the line with us.
Business Model U.
I'm here.
Hey,
Tim.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. We're excited, and everyone's excited.
Yes, we are very excited to have you on.
So let's get started.
Well, and yeah, please do.
So what led you to write the Business Model U right after Business Model Generation?
Well, while I was working on Business Model Generation, I one day sat down and I was thinking about my own career. And I thought, why can't I just apply this canvas to me as a person? And so I did that. I draw what I call a personal business model. And the results just blew me away. It was so helpful and so powerful for me that I thought, well, this could help a lot of other people. So I called up Alex. I said, Alex, I've got this idea, and I explained it to him, and he said, wow, it sounds great. But he was swamped with Business Model Generation. So it took it took a full year before I actually started working on the book.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I have.
She brought hers so you could see it.
Yeah, Tim. I don't know if you can see us or anything. We are doing.
I do see you.
Okay, great.
Good.
Okay, now we really going to perform over here. So
I didn't bring mine, but she did.
But you see all this written, and this is my first version. So I haven't gotten to the point of doing my second version yet. Mm-hmm. But I told someone when I did the Business Model U, I was able to, I got excited. I was like, okay, this is, putting yourself in that place, like you said, was just an eye-opener. It was really an eye-opener to be able to do that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I loved it. Just doing it myself, you see how you can get yourself out of a rut if you're in a rut, career rut, or how you can change your career.
And especially with us just finishing up school, it's key.
Exactly.
It's key.
It's great.
Well, we all have lots of thoughts about our career going around in our minds all the time, right? It's like a big filing cabinet with only one label called miscellaneous, and it's all just spinning around up there. So it really helps if you can get it out of your head and onto a single sheet of the paper, and the clarity you gain by doing that is really astonishing. So I'm so glad that you both found it useful.
Yeah, and I've referred it to several people. I even bought some people the book.
Look at you. All right now.
What's that?
Yeah, I was like, you need this.
You need it. You need help. So how did you develop the content for the book, from you saying, okay, I see how this could work. I see how this could work for others. business model you, but how did you develop the content to then have that be your driving force?
Sure. Well, Anthony, I needed it too. That's why I wrote the book. So,
okay.
Well, when I was in my 40s before I really discovered, and well, not discovered, but until I evolved to a place where I knew what I really wanted to do. And I felt that I wanted other people to, to do that a little bit sooner in life. And actually, I was a psychology major in college. And at one point, I thought I wanted to be a career counselor, but I had no career of my own. So well, how can I be a career counselor if I've never actually done anything? So I went into business, and I did a lot of things over the years. But the place where I finally started to find myself, I guess, is when I became an entrepreneur. And I started a business, and one of the first lessons I learned as an entrepreneur is that your initial idea is almost always wrong.
Wow.
In other words, you've come up with a business model which you may not even have articulated, but it's by default you have some hypothesis about something you think might work, right? And generally this is the way it works. The direction is good, but the model itself is usually wrong. It almost always has to be changed in order to work.
Okay.
And I found this out from my own experience as an entrepreneur. I was very lucky, and the business I was in was helping other companies essentially replicate their business models in overseas markets. For example, in 1997, Amazon.com hired us to create their first Japanese language. We did, and we also did a lot of other work for other companies that wanted to sell or even establish brand new units in Japan, Taiwan, and Korea. So I had kind of a first-hand look at how business models were either being successfully replicated or unsuccessfully replicated in overseas markets. And that's how I got interested in the whole notion of business models. So I started that company in 1994. It ended up being successful, and we had a lot of clients who were essentially .com retailers and other firms. And those companies had what they called business models. And so my first exposure was to these internet business models. Anyway, after we got a buyout offer, I sold the company and worked for a couple of years after that with the firm. That was an earn-out requirement. After that, I basically went into my midlife crisis because I was burned out. I left the company, and I wanted to, I wanted to do something different. And what I decided I wanted to do was to teach.
Okay.
And so I became a teacher, and what I wanted to teach was entrepreneurship. Not because I knew so much about it. It was more like, what happened to me over these past 8 years. It was such an incredible experience, but I didn't have a formal understanding of the entrepreneurial process. So that was really the beginning of Business Model U in a way. I liked teaching so much that I decided to go back to school and get a doctoral degree, and I did business models as my doctoral thesis. Oh, wow. And that's when I got in touch with Alex and so forth. But all this time, I was starting to feel that rather than traditional sort of focus on ventures and organizations, in the work with my students, I became more and more interested in helping them be personally entrepreneurial. And in fact, the students who came to my courses, although a lot of them did want to start ventures and so forth, most of them really just wanted to change their lives. They wanted to change their careers. They wanted to advance, and not necessarily in the sort of stairway to heaven, going up the ladder, but advance in the sense of doing something that was more meaningful for themselves, or spending more time with family, but still making a decent living. They wanted to change the model by which they were working. Okay. And so I started sort of formulating the idea that career development really is a form of entrepreneurship, because what you're doing is you're seeking a sustainable model for the way you work. And when you start your career, you don't know what that is. You just take a job.
Very true.
The problem is that most of us just keep taking one job in a row.
Absolutely.
We never come up with a professional identity towards which we're striving. We're saying, this is what I aspire to be. Ultimately, we just take one job in a row. But taking one job in a row is not managing your career.
It isn't. Right. Absolutely. So what do you think are the 5 important reasons for you to do a personal business model canvas?
5?
Can you name 5?
He probably has more.
You probably have about 20, but can we get top 5?
Well, I think the first of it is that again, that managing a career really is not taking one job in a row. It's establishing or discovering, evolving your professional identity, and then creating a model for that.
Okay.
So that you can move towards that identity over time, but you must do that in response to the marketplace. There's lots of books and schools of thought that are kind of cheerleaders for, you can be anything you want to be and you can do it, and all you need is courage or all you need is passion. But frankly, I don't believe that. We're operating in an ecosystem, right? We can't do anything we want. We can do many things, but we're operating in a marketplace. So it's very helpful to be logical and to articulate the value you provide in the marketplace, and then design your career, model your career in step with actual marketplace reality, and then move forward with it. So I'd say those were probably the 2 most important things.
Okay. All right, cool.
So how did you know that the business model canvas was the right fit or muse to then put that business model you spin on it?
Well, Anthony, I didn't. But I had such a powerful experience that I had a hypothesis that it would be.
Okay.
And so I tested that with a number of people, and everyone with whom I tested that had a similar experience. So I had a pretty strong feeling with some data that said, this does work for individuals as it does for organizations. But the big test was basically writing the book, and the way we wrote the book was creating a community and putting forth some initial chapters and inviting people to comment and to test the model as we went along. So we were testing and revising as we went along, and what we came up with by the end was similar to, but still quite different from what we started with at the beginning. So that was how it evolved.
Okay.
Well, in doing the business model canvas for yourself personally, is your suggestion that, okay, so you have the book, do you just start from page 1 and move forward? Because that's what I did. I just followed the book. But if someone's some people, don't want to follow a book. But do you?
Sure.
Would they just jump into doing?
Or where would they go?
Yeah, where would they go if they say, okay, I have this book, but I'm not a reader.
I'm not reading all
I
of
don't want to
it.
do anything else self-help, which you hear people say,
Absolutely.
Do they just jump in?
It's a great question, and I think it really depends on your stage of life.
Okay.
If you're a student, you don't have a lot of full-time work experience, you still may want to do quite a bit of self-discovery, then you might want to start right at the beginning. If you're a mid-career professional and you're looking to make a change or even to reinvent how you work, you might want to jump in straight in with the canvas, because you can just take the canvas and you can draw a diagram of where you're at today. Here are my activities, these are the value I create, here are my customers, these are the channels. And you may have a pretty good self-knowledge at that point, so you don't necessarily need to go back and do a lot of the self-discovery exercises. I took it in sequence on the assumption that people were doing kind of a pretty from the ground up reinvention, and that they may want to start from the very beginning. But certainly you can jump in wherever it makes sense.
Okay. All right. So, with that said, then, do you think that the book is just for people in transition or feeling stuck where they are, or what?
Well, I think it's particularly helpful for people who feel stuck or in transition, or they're not getting the traction they want, or external forces are forcing a change on them. The industry is consolidating and so forth, or the company they're in, the organization they're with is declining. On the other hand, I think it's also useful for students or people who are just starting out in their careers to get a sense that you don't plan a career, you model a career.
Right. Excellent point.
You test it. You're testing things, and you're going to make iterations as you go along. But you want to do that with the idea again that you're not just taking one job in a row, this sort of sequential, rocket launch and bunk, and then you land on planet job, and you suck all the oxygen out of the air, and then you die. Okay, got to relaunch again. You really want to be kind of orbiting this career universe in a new way. The other thing I'd say, though, is that it's really important that we all realize that this is what we're trying to learn here is the skill of modeling. We're not trying to come up with the right model, and then we're going to execute on that model for the rest of our lives. Because we all know, and especially coming from a design background, that the shelf life of an organizational business model is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, right? Yep. And therefore, the shelf life of a personal business model is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So the book is not just for people who are stuck, but for people who have a good professional identity in mind, but they see that changes are coming and becoming aware of trends that are going to affect their careers and proactively planning, modeling now so that they can make the changes that are sure to come in the future.
Do you think, based on, you continue to travel to do workshops, do you think initially when people start into your workshops, do they get the fact of the modeling, or do more people turn around and just keep going job to job? Is that the higher percentage of what you see? Or because, when people come in your class, they already have the knowledge, I'm ready to change.
Right.
But, do you think the general consensus is most people just job to job and don't model a career?
Karen, I think that most of us, and I was like this too, do go from job to job. Okay. And, over time, for me, I gravitated towards teaching, writing and teaching over time, and that, naturally you do graduate towards those things. Hopefully it doesn't take you 30 years, though. Hopefully you can try to gravitate a little more quickly. So, but I think that most of us develop our careers by default, and in other words, this happens, and I got lucky, or I found this job from whatever. It's really chance or serendipity or just sort of the default, and I'm not saying that we can, control the universe and do exactly what we want at all times, but I do believe that most people, this is how most of us do develop our careers, and if that's not real career management, not that we can always manage everything perfectly, but we can be much more logical or intentional about how we drive our careers forward. So yes, most of the people who do come to the workshops are still in that mode, but they recognize that this has got to stop.
Right, exactly.
I've got to become intentional, and that's why I'm here.
And that's why they're there, exactly.
Yeah.
So how and why did you come up with the Lifeline Discovery tool?
Well, I didn't, Anthony. That was contributed by Denise Taylor, who's a wonderful career counselor and psychologist in the UK.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure where she got it. I think it's a tool that's used widely by professional career counselors.
Okay.
But I really liked that one because it's not just this sort of navel gazing. It's not this sort of introspection. It's a way to explicate. In other words, get things out of your mind and get them onto paper and onto a permanent place where you can now share them with other people. And Karen would look at mine and say, here you were teaching and you were really enjoying yourself. Here you were teaching and you're really enjoying yourself. Isn't teaching kind of a common theme? And I go, yeah, you're right. And I'd never noticed that before, right? Exactly. No, this happens all the time. So it's a wonderful tool, and it's practical. There's something that I always like to say is that people tend to assume that we have some kind of a passion inside, or we're born with some sort of internal passion or destiny or something that we're really made to do, and that somehow if we can just introspect, hard enough, that we will figure out what that is.
Okay.
But that's basically not true at all. Most of us we're not born with some kind of passion. I mean, some people are, and they're very lucky, and they find out at very early age that they're great at doing whatever they do. But most of us don't have that passion. Passion and enthusiasm over an occupation is something ordinarily that develops over time.
Okay.
And it only develops in step with competence. In other words, passion doesn't, if every college student who wanted to have a nonprofit that was going to save the world, if enthusiasm and passion was sufficient to make those organizations work, the world would be full of nonprofit organizations that are wildly successful today, and there would be hundreds on every single college campus in the United States, right?
Right.
But the fact is that's not the case, and the reason is because passion and enthusiasm is not enough to develop a career. You need competence and you need experience. I mean, these are not things you want to put on the cover of a best-selling book because people want to think that it's easy and fast. It's not. It's difficult and it takes time. That's the truth, right? So, passion and enthusiasm develop over time in step with competence and experience.
And just in people listening, hearing the fact that everybody doesn't have that passion in the very beginning, is probably people's hearts skipped a beat for just a second. Because,
but it's true, though.
Yeah,
it's very true.
It is true, but people want to believe that, and maybe it hasn't come to me yet, that type of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was the same way. In college, you're passionate about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, maybe. But most of us can't make a career out of that. Maybe Keith Richards can. He's done a good job at it.
Right.
But and you feel like, gosh, what do I care about? Well, you don't go easy on yourself. You should. Most of us don't have passion. Again, give yourself time. It'll come with time. So don't beat yourself up if you don't feel like you've developed passion in your life yet. That'll come.
Well, that's good to say, because I'm sure most people beat themselves up. That they don't have passion and probably get to a point where they think it's just never going to come because they don't know how to tap into it, at all.
Well, and people think I missed my calling, or what's my calling? You've heard that term, right? And that I think that's a kind of a destructive term in a way, because the original meaning of calling is a Christian term, that you're being called by God to do some wondrous work on earth, right? And so people that came into sort of secular, non-religious life as a feeling like, wow, what's my calling? What was I put on earth to do? What should I do? And if they don't have some wondrous, life work in mind, they feel really inadequate. So I think that we got to recognize that well, first of all, most of us don't have calling. The calling is a very strong word. It's like a missionary or an artist who's got to do this at all costs.
Absolutely.
Regardless of whether you make money or anything. That's a different world. There's very few of us live in that world. Most of us live in the world where we want to make a living and we want to be satisfied. We want to contribute and be satisfied, but we also want to do something that we like. We don't want to be miserable.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think that's why with the Lifeline Discovery tool, when you do the high and the low points, it especially when you have to go back as far as you can remember. And I know for me, I was like, just to say that was like, oh goodness, I was like, you're like, how far back can I go? And then, after I did it, it was like, then it had this long high point, which for me was a great recognition. Like, okay, wow, there have been this place, and then it dropped down for a second, and it came back up again. But really because I had done the exercise about before you were 20 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that prior helped me to do the high and the low points easier.
Okay.
Because I think that if I wouldn't have done that, I probably would have gone back maybe about 5 or 6 years, like right before I had my son, because for me that's what's most in my mind, and probably is the most celebration. So I think, I mean, even for people who, you're picking up the book, I think that if you start there with the tools, then that will help you. It helped transition through the book easiest.
Yeah. Yeah, the Lifeline Discovery would be a great place to start for anybody, really, because and the other thing that you bring out, Karen, I think, is that we all need more feedback.
Yeah.
And part of the principle of creating a satisfying career is creating what we call a feedback-rich environment for ourselves. And frankly, a lot of us, we just don't have that. Where we work, there's a lot of politics, or if you start asking for feedback in too direct a way, it's like, are you planning on quitting? Are you gunning for my job?
That's very
it's like,
true.
Come on, but a simple way to start is the Lifeline Discovery exercise, where you do this with somebody else, and you say, and you they draw theirs, and we do this in the workshops. You draw yours, and they draw theirs, and you switch, and then you help each other talk through them, and this feedback is just so helpful. And especially don't try this with your husband, by the way. Do this with someone who's emotionally detached from this and has just thinking about professional work. Save the husband for the real emotional capital that you need at different times. So that's another reason that the workshops are so helpful, is because everyone is there with a common goal, and very smart, very nice, or very helpful people, but they're emotionally detached from you, and so the kind of feedback you can get is just phenomenal. So I'd suggest doing it with colleagues from a different company would be ideal. Professional colleague who you have no interest. You have no professional interest in their work, and they have none in yours. You're just trying to help each other.
Okay, that's a good tidbit. That makes sense. And would you suggest that the same for when you do the reflection, the one with all the words on it, like page 122 and 23?
I love that.
Who do you give that to?
Well, for that, I think that you can cast your net a little bit wider, because it is helpful to get people who know you well. But again, try to avoid immediate family members or spouses, because let's face it, they know you so well. Try to work with people who know you in a professional setting and have a fairly clear-eyed or a objective view on who you are. So, coworkers, professional friends, industry associates, former subordinates, colleagues, bosses, and so forth would be ideal.
Okay.
So, do you think creative thinking is a natural process in the mind, or does it have to be something that's taught?
Well, yes and yes. I think we all have. We all have some, we all have inborn creativity to some extent, and some of us more creative than others. I don't view myself as a particularly creative person, but here's a hint, and this is something that I think is a good takeaway. When you have this, when you use the canvas here, this is the personal business model canvas. This is what we like to call a light frame. And when people have a light frame upon which they can start drawing, it frees up their creativity. As design, I understand that you both have a design background. I think you recognize very strongly that limitations are exactly what makes it possible to be creative.
Yeah, very true.
In other words, if you have a scope, this is what has to be done. It's not like, okay, think of a story. It could be anything. Go ahead, write a story. Well, that is such a broad assignment that in one way it's very freeing, but in other ways it makes it kind of paralyzes you. There's so much possibility that it paralyzes you. Whereas if you have a nice framework or a very concrete scope, and you can say, here, okay, write this little story using these 9 elements, for example. okay, well, I'll start with this box, and it gives you a step-by-step way, and then paradoxically, by offering a structure, it actually enhances your creativity. So I'm a big fan of tools that enhance creativity by offering structure.
Okay. So that's where it comes into where one of our guests before, her focus was just creativity. She was saying how essential career development was to the creative community.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Again, we're all constantly developing our careers in different ways, and we never know how they're going to evolve. There's a lot of serendipity and chance and just circumstance that goes into a career development. But I think you can enhance your possibilities for being more creative and for being lucky if you are striving towards a professional identity. And again, that's
okay.
I like to use in the book. There's an analogy. It's if everyone says, okay, let's meet let's say you have 4 people all over the globe, and they say, okay, let's all meet at the North Pole. Mm-hmm. Okay, so 37 days later, they all make their way to the North Pole, and they all meet and say, okay, we're all at the North Pole. What's next?
Mm-hmm.
There's no place to go. They've all got to go now in different directions because they're all at the North Pole. But
that's funny.
If you were, they say, let's all aim for the North Star, which is way off in heaven somewhere. Let's all aim for the North Star, and that can align our directions. Then you're never gonna get there, right? Because it's just a direction. You can never travel all the way to the North Star. But it's a constant alignment. It's not a destination that you're going to reach, and then there's nowhere else to go. It's like this constant guiding direction. That's your professional identity. That's what you want to strive for.
Okay.
So if you can establish that's going to help your creativity and your career.
I never thought about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's a good, the story really helped it too, because I'm a visual person. So I was like, okay, the story. Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting though. Very.
Because I know for me, just you two coming from a design background, we like loose structure.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we know we can go but so far, but we know what is expected of us.
Yeah, and then my business background pulls in where I like tools. That's why I started from page 1.
Yeah, me too.
Because I was like, every step I have to do, and not skipping on to the next step too. So the business side pulls that in, but then the design side, wants the wings to not be, trapped in any particular way as well. So, and that struggles.
One of the reasons business model generation was so successful is that if you look you go into any bookstore and you look in the business section, right, and you pull out any single business book, and it's all text and maybe a few Excel, graphs, right, or a few tables.
That's very true.
But there's no design.
Yes, absolutely.
There's essentially no design, and business model generation was, in my view, probably the first business book to have an extensively designed, but for the design to be integrated into the message of the book as well as just the looks of it. As you know better than most of us, design is not decoration, right?
Yeah.
Design is an integral part of the message and the value of something, and so that's I think one reason, not by no means the only reason, but that integration of design and business in the book itself was a huge factor behind its success.
Yeah, and I think people who are design, plus business, that's why people were so excited behind the book, because like you said, if you go and you read, it really is just text heavy.
Text heavy, but it's engaging.
Yeah.
And it's engaging through the design. From me looking at it from that aspect.
And to do things, the ability to do things with the book, because especially if I started initially getting an MBA, it just was not for me, but it was because it was so text heavy, it was so theory based, that it didn't hold me for me to turn around and get an MBA. It just did not work.
Right. Which is where we are now. And we love what we do.
Yeah.
Well, my ears are burning because I did get an MBA. It took me 6 years to get through that course.
See, that's what would have happened to me too. See,
it was so close. I barely made it through.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did. In retrospect, it was great. But it was really about vocabulary. And if you understand the vocabulary and you understand the principles about this, now you can talk to an accountant and you understand. Now you can talk to an operations management person. Now you can talk to a marketing person and you understand what they're saying. That's really what it was about. But I agree with you that it's you're leaving out a whole other side of the brain in a sense. It's really designed for people who learn through words and reading, and to a lesser extent through talking. But it leaves out a big part of the world who learns through kinesthetic learning, moving and learning, or visual learning. So. I think there's a great part in business model generation that says, business people have to become better designers.
Right.
And designers have to become better business people.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's the great balance, of the two. So, but let me remind people, if you have any questions, you can call us at 202-889-9797, or you can send a Twitter message at BTM Radio Show or Facebook at Behind the Mind Radio Show. But someone did have a question for you. Her question was, it's Michelle. She wanted to know, how do you now use that personal business model canvas to generate business? She's a business owner, and she's like, this is key for her. So how does she step out now and try to use this, apply it?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, and that's I think the next extension of the methodology is really around that fourth phase that we talk about in the book, which is ACT.
Okay.
And ACT is basically where you start with draw. Draw is phase number one. That's where you draw your model today, and it's like a self-assessment. Where am I now? The second phase is to reflect, and then you look at you look at where you are now and reflect on that, and get some insight on where you want to be. Third is revise, and that's where you start creating different hypotheses or different possibilities, generating a bunch of different models that you think might work for yourself. Then we get to ACT, and ACT is really it's where you pick one of the hypotheses, one model you really like. This is what I want to do, and you go out and test that model in the market.
Okay.
So this is analogous to Steve Blank's customer development phase. And Steve Blank is one of the leading thinkers on entrepreneurship, and his work is brilliant. But here's where you go out and test that hypothesis in the marketplace. And what that means basically is you go and you talk to prospective customers or with actual customers, and you share what you're looking at, or you otherwise elicit from them what their problems are, or what their needs are, what trends or issues or needs, problems they're facing, and then see if your value proposition, what you're offering, is a match or not.
Okay.
So that's basically it's this iterative process of taking this hypothesis and testing it in the marketplace.
Okay.
And as a business owner, I'm sure she's familiar with that. But I think if you can take a kind of a formal approach to this, it's very helpful. And I would recommend Steve Blank's work as a great guide for that, and doing that on an organizational basis.
So should she test it from existing clients, or when you test, because sometimes you don't want, your clients knowing that
you're tweaking things.
Yeah. So how do you do that without exposing too much, or should you expose? That's interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on, she's got customer segments now. Is the offer she's testing, is it designed for those segments, or is it designed for a new segment? If it's designed for a new segment, she's going to have to test for the new segment. If it's designed for a current segment, she's going to have to go to the customers with whom she has the best relationship and design that test very carefully. So that's another part of this, is how do you design the test that you're going to conduct? And when Steve Blank talks about this, and a lot of the businesses he deals with are software and web-based, and those kinds of tests can be very discreet and clear-cut and clean, because you put up a web page, see how many of this you get, blah blah blah.
Right, exactly.
That's if you're in a service business that's not all web-based, it can become it's very challenging. It's not an easy thing to do. So.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So what would testing that look like? What would just as an example, how would Michelle test her business model?
What kind of business is she in?
Marketing, communications, and the art scene, art and culture.
Yes.
I see. Okay. Well, so she may have a hypothesis that, a certain form of social media and a certain type of message within a certain form of social media could be very effective in acquiring new customers or sponsors for let's say a certain type of exhibition or whatever. Okay. So one thing she might do is go to a current customer and say, look, I've got this. I have this hypothesis that I want to test, and here's what it is. I believe that that this, if we do these kinds of placements in these kind of media, that we could try some that we might be able to really generate some traction in this area. Okay. Would you be willing with me to test this? And what I'll commit for you is to do this test at half my regular rates. And then you would just agree to buy, to do this spend on these certain ads. Okay. That would be the most direct form of testing. But to be really honest and upfront with your client, and say, this is something we can try together.
Okay, that's good. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because I was worried about, like, how would you do it without giving the client too much risk? And you just said that, like, cutting your rate. So,
right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, did you hear that, Michelle?
I hope you're listening.
And by the way, if you would like the Russian version of a business model, I'd like to promote it right here on the show.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
So, all right.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Yeah. So we were tweeting out the Holland 6 tendencies because that's my favorite.
We love them.
Yeah, I scored.
We have to talk about those.
19 in the artistic category. Everything else was like 7 and 5. I'm just gonna put my business out there for just a second.
Mine's I could see.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. It was 19.
Well, John Holland.
I was surprised too, though. I didn't know it was gonna be that. You know what I'm saying? That high either.
Mine's was bad too.
So. Yours was in high and then above 15 as well.
As far as the artistic, it was 20.
Okay.
It was 20, and then I was like 6s everywhere else.
Okay. So. Okay. I'm a 0 in the realistic conventional. Wow. And I was like, huh?
Conventional. She even wrote in hers. You got to show them.
I mean, because I have been in business so long and have, next was my creativity portion. So it really lets me know how I have shifted since going to SCAD. It has, totally has done a shift for me. And I think it's always been there, don't get me wrong, but for 18 of the years, I've been so business marketing focused. And then second, the design supported it, that, it was interesting to me to see the conventional, like bookkeeper and all that other stuff that I know that I do, just kind of go to 0.
Sure. I know for me it's the opposite. I've been in the artistic background, and now I'm in an art director artistic background, and now I'm trying to do all that bookkeeping and all that. So it's just like I'm trying to creep back up to where she is.
Right.
So yeah.
That's interesting. It was a good tool.
Well, for listeners who aren't familiar with John Holland was a very influential psychologist, and he made a statement that he's one of these guys. He came up with this amazing insight, and it's such a simple idea, but as soon as he expressed it, everyone understood that it is intuitively obvious and absolutely true. And the idea is that careers are an expression of personality in exactly the same way that Our hobbies are an expression of personality. Our friends who we choose as friends is an expression of personality. Our spouses who we come together with, the spouses are an expression of personality. The foods we like and so forth. And you know, that seems so incredibly obvious, but it wasn't. And that has a lot of implications. And one of the implications is that you need to be in a workspace that's compatible with that personality.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when you think about a workspace, what is a workspace made up of? Well, it's basically made up of other people, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're, you know, and not to generalize, but it's essentially, you know, largely true that, you know, people who work in insurance companies and banks tend to be tend to be conventional, have this conventional bent to their personality. They like order and rules and convention and for things to be orderly and so forth. If you're a creative person, you're not going to be happy working in a bank and an insurance company. Okay, this sounds just so incredibly obvious, but and anyway, he came up with these 6 personality tendencies, and again, they're not types. They're just 6 sort of tendencies we all have. You know, there's conventional, enterprising, social, artistic, conventional, you know, investigative, realistic, and what everyone has a mix of those traits, but some of them are more predominant than others. So, Karen, you know, you're a 20 and you're artistic. Anthony, same. My biggest one is enterprising, but artistic is right after that. I'm a 10 on enterprising, which means being like a entrepreneur or in sales and leadership and so forth. But I'm a 9 on artistic, so it's a very close second one for me.
And it sounds like you've gotten to a point of good balance too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But I think it's very helpful. And the thing I also love about John Holland was, he said, near the end of his career, he said, every time I rework this, he says, I haven't got it quite right yet. And here's this guy, here's a guy who created essentially the most influential, you know, career inventory. What his work is the basis for the, you know, U.S. Department of Labor, you know, career, you know, compatibility tests, all this stuff. And yet he himself says, I never got it quite right. So I just love him because it's like, you know, it's not a religion.
Right.
It's just a useful tool. None of these things are you know, dogma or you have to do this or that. They're just tools that can be useful. So that's how we should think about them.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, we run out of time.
We're out of time. Thank you so much, Tim, for coming on the show.
We're gonna have to have you back, and really, I'm really interested in you coming to DC. So we have to talk offline about that.
You travel all over the world. You got to come visit us.
I would love to, and I've got one standing invitation, so let's make it happen.
Okay, let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim Clark. We appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. You're listening to Behind the Mind Radio Show on We Act Radio, 1480 AM. We will see you next week. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
We Act Radio, Behind the Mind. We want to hear from people that find the time to think and create these fine designs and then turn them into real product lines. So call us.
Where else will you get the most current information on game changers,
design thinkers, and well-known innovators?
In-depth interviews from visionaries, trendsetters, from science to food to entertainment.
On the Behind the Mind Radio Show.
We Act Radio, 1480 AM, 11 AM to 12 PM every Friday. Join me, your host, Karen Baker.
And me, Anthony Leonard.
We'll talk about design, innovation, and culture.
Think different about design. Behind the Mind Radio Show.
Stay tuned to We Act Radio, Washington, D.C.'s only independent radio station. Catch us online at weactradio.com.